Good morning, Year 5, and welcome to our English lesson. So it's the first one we're trying with our video lessons, so hopefully there won't be any teething issues. But yeah, let's give it a try. So when we go through it today, there's going to be pauses at various points just to allow you to do a little bit of work. So if you pause the video at that point and carry out the task that I've given you, and then start it again when you finish with it. Right, so today we're going to be moving on from yesterday's work where we worked on setting descriptions, looking at a winter castle and come up with our descriptions of it, and maybe some of you did the challenge of describing it during the spring or maybe the summer and what the differences were between those two. And today we're going to be looking at character descriptions. This is the character that we are going to be describing today. So you can start looking at the picture and thinking about what you might want to describe. Before we start thinking about our character description, we are going to play a quick game of Word Wars. So we've definitely played this before in Tiger class. I'm not sure if Leopards have played this. So how it works is I give you a sentence, which today is he was tall, and then you're going to pause the video for 4 minutes just to see what sentence you can make from that. So how can you improve the sentence he was tall? What other information could you add to that? And how could you change it? You can include more than one sentence. You can write a paragraph if you want to. The idea is that you don't change the main information, but you can add as much as you like. So at the end of it, I still need to know that this man was tall, but you can add in lots more information there. You could use synonyms for tall. You could use figurative language. You could use similes and metaphors. You could describe what he's doing. So just give the video a pause just for 4 minutes, see what you can come up with to improve that short sentence. So just pause it now. Okay, I'd be very interested to know what you came up with during that. So you can, if we're still on Tapestry, post your sentence on there for me to have a look, or hopefully we're on Microsoft Teams now and you should be able to post your sentence on there for me to have a look and see what you've come up with. And then we're just going to play another quick game to introduce a piece of vocabulary to you. So I'm going to show you a word and then I'm going to give you 3 different meanings, and I want you to just pause the video after you have the 3 different meanings and figure out which one you think the definition is. So our word today is deceptive. So my first potential meaning is A. So something that is deceptive is something that is misleading. And my example sentence is, the monkey's tail was deceptively long and it was able to reach around its unsuspecting victim with it and steal its food. So that's my first potential definition of deceptive. My second one is to reject something. So I'm saying to be deceptive is to reject something. The lady was deceptive of the man's idea to mix the toxic substances. And then my third potential definition is that deceptive is a chemical found in a chameleon's body that allows it to camouflage. The chameleon managed to completely blend in with its surroundings thanks to high levels of deceptive under its skin. So if you just pause the video now, have a look at those definitions and decide whether you think the meaning of deceptive is something that is misleading, to reject something, or a chemical found in a chameleon's body that allows it to camouflage. Decide which letter you think it is. So the correct meaning of deceptive is something that is misleading. So if you are deceiving someone, you are trying to mislead them. Right, so we're going to move on to our character description now. So I just skipped a slide there. So what is the point in a character description? Why do we need them? Why can't you just say, there is a man? Why do you need more of a description than just, there is a man? So just pause the video and have a quick think about why we need to describe these characters if we're introducing them in a story, as opposed to just saying, there is a man. Okay, so as we work through this, hopefully you'll begin to see why we are including our descriptions rather than just saying there is a man or there is a dragon in our situation. I'm going to read you a description that I've written now, and I would like you to decide what you think of it. So, once upon a time there was a man who had arms and legs which were attached to a body. There was a head on top of his body, which had eyes and ears and a nose. At the end of his arms there were hands, and at the end of them there were fingers, and at the end of the fingers there were nails. His toes had nails too. So what is wrong with that description? I've described quite a lot about the man there, but what isn't quite right about it if we want to produce a quality description? So it wasn't great, was it? We need to add details to enable the reader to create a picture in their mind of the character. I just gave you loads of really basic details there to describe what could be any person, and we need to make it specific to the character so they can paint a picture in their mind of what they really look like and potentially what they are like as a person. So let's look at our character again. So we're going to be thinking about what body parts we could describe. So as I'm looking at this, I've got a bit of paper next to me and I'm going to be noting down a list of things that I might be able to describe. So I might start at the tip of its nose and look at its flaming nostrils or this razor sharp horn or spike that's on the tip of its nose. I might follow its face along and come to its fiery eyes. Look at the horns that sit atop its head and the spikes that run down its back. I could look at its jagged teeth that are dagger-like in its mouth, to be used for devouring and tearing apart its prey. I could look at its fire-like tongue and potentially smoke that starts to billow out of its nostrils. I could look underneath its chin and look at these frills that it has underneath that run along the length of his body. Maybe they come out just when he's breathing fire. I could look at his muscular arms and legs that could be used to hold down its prey and its sharp talons. I could look at its huge wings that spread across its back from betwixt its shoulder blades. I could look along its snake-like tail that is as long as a river and winds around its prey as it holds them down. So as you can see, there's loads of different parts of this body that I could describe. We could describe the scales, we could describe so many different things. So just take a few minutes just to look at that picture and think about what you could describe. I've just got a few more images of some dragons here, and you can look up your own images of dragons if you think it might help you as well. Just to help you with the description, you might see them from different angles and see some different body parts that you hadn't thought of. So if we look at the dragons on the right, you can see that their bodies are slightly different, and you could talk about maybe the parallel spikes that run down its back. You could talk about its rough skin. You could talk about the long towering horns that sit upon the dragon in the middle's head. You could talk about its long slender neck. You could talk about the humongous wingspan of the dragon on the left, and you could talk about how it would cast huge shadows on the ground below, making the people there cower in fear. So you could just have a look at these pictures for a few minutes again and see if there's any body parts or things in there that you'd like to describe about your dragon that you haven't thought of yet. So I've made a list earlier, along with the one I've been writing down, of just a few of the things that I might want to include in my description. As I start writing my description, I might think of a few more things that I want to describe. But I've just got a basic list here of all the nouns that I'm going to start describing as I write my description. So I'm going to look at the eyes, the nostrils, the mouth, the teeth, its breath, its torso, which is its body, its tail, its wings, its scales that line its skin, its talons, which are its claws, its legs, and the spikes that might be all over its body or just on certain parts of it, which I'll leave that up to you to decide. So when we're writing a description, quite often we use figurative language to allow us to gain a better picture in our mind of what something looks like by comparing it to things that we already know. So I'm just going to go through a few examples that I have written here that you might be able to use to help you describe your character. So the first one I'm going to look at is this one here. So when I bring up my examples, there'll be text, and some of the text will be a different colour, and I'll explain why after I've read each of my sentences. So, piercing eyes, which are pools of fire, scan the horizon, searching for signs of life. So I have highlighted which are pools of fire, and some of you might have figured out already why I have highlighted that. Firstly, it's because it's a relative clause, and I'm adding more information about my noun. I'm adding more information about those eyes. I'm starting it between my commas with the word which. If it was a person, I'd start with who. So which are pools of fire. I've also highlighted it because I've used a type of figurative language, and that is a metaphor, because I'm saying its eyes are pools of fire. So if it was a singular thing, if I was talking about its eye, I would say is a pool of fire, but I'm using are because it's a plural. So that is highlighted because it is a relative clause, and I'm using some figurative language with my metaphor. Here's my next sentence I have come up with. Twisting and turning like a cyclone, which is like a tornado, its undulating body winds between thunderous clouds and whistling wind as its wings carry this towering titan ever higher. So I've got a couple of things highlighted there. I've got twisting and turning, which is a type of figurative language called alliteration, where the sounds of the words start with the same sound. So we've got twisting, turning. So there's alliteration there, and on top of that, we've got a simile in there because I'm saying it is like a cyclone. So it's like a tornado as it turns around between those thunderous clouds. And then we have got whistling wind. So firstly, I have alliteration in there, and then I've got personification, because wind doesn't whistle. It sounds like it whistles, but that is a human action. So I've got personification in there as well. The next sentence I could have highlighted all of it. I haven't, just so a couple of things stand out. But we start with a preposition, which tells you the position of something. Prepositions are great when describing a character because it allows you to tell the reader where these things are. So betwixt, which is a synonym of between. Betwixt its shoulder blades, wings as wide as the mouth of a river reach out and lift the monster into the stormy sky. So at the end, we have some alliteration with stormy sky. At the beginning, after our preposition, we have wings as wide as a mouth, which I'm sure you've noticed is a simile. And then we also, within that sentence, which is filled with figurative language, we have personification, because the river is reaching out, and rivers do not reach, people do. So that is a type of personification. My final example here is its kingdom cowers below. So I've highlighted cowers because that is something a human does. A kingdom does not shake with fear. A person does. That is personification. And you might also notice that I haven't used an apostrophe for its. The kingdom belongs to it. However, the word its is already possessive, so I do not need an apostrophe there unless I want to make it the words it is. So no apostrophe when you're using its for possession. So now I've got my list of nouns that I want to start using to make my sentences. I'm going to start thinking about how I'm going to do that. And I've decided to make it easier for me to describe things and so I don't forget certain body parts. I'm going to start at the tip of its nose and work my way down the body until I get to the tip of its tail. And I would probably advise you to do something similar, just so you don't forget parts of your character that you're describing. So I'm going to start at its nose, and I'm going to think of an action that the nose might be doing. So I'm going to start with sniffing, because I think that my dragon is going to be sniffing a lot because it likes to search for things. It's a pretty hungry dragon. Now I'm going to say, sniffing, its beak-like snout, so snout is a synonym for nose, its beak-like snout searches for its next victim. So I have tried hard to use my alliteration there, and I have got snout searches. That's a type of figurative language that I have used. So I've ticked that off. So I've started to describe my nose. I might want to write a little bit more about it. I might want to talk about billowing smoke coming out of its nostrils. I might want to talk about its cavernous nostrils that appear to be on fire. So I could extend that further if I like, but I'm just going to move on to the next body part, which is going to be its mouth. So I'm going to start thinking about what is going on with that mouth. And I don't think you can really describe the mouth of a dragon without describing its teeth and how dangerous they are. So we're going to start with the word jagged. So my dragon's teeth, they're really sharp and pointy, and I'm going to go with the word jagged here. So I'm going to open it with that, and then I'm going to finish it off with jagged. Its pointy teeth are covered in flesh from its latest meal, dripping with blood and as strong as unbreakable steel. I didn't realise that rhymed until this moment right now. But the end part of my sentence, you might have figured out already, is a simile. So I've compared its teeth to something that is as strong as unbreakable steel. And I've improved, if I'd just written as strong as steel, that is a simile, but it's not as powerful as describing it a little bit more with the word unbreakable. So I've given you just a couple of examples of how I'm building my sentences there. I've given you some examples of figurative language, and now I'm going to show you just a few sentences that some of my students in the past have come up with when we've been describing dragons or monsters. So my first one, and once again I'm going to highlight bits just to show you the sort of thing that we're looking for. My first one is, my dragon, which was born to protect and watch over me, is a myriad of colours, has whisper-thin wings, and a slender torso. So the bit that's highlighted in red, once again, is a relative clause and give you more information about that noun. And then I have gone on to describe other parts of that dragon, but the main part I'm highlighting there is the fantastic use of the relative clause, because if I get rid of that, I could have my dragon has whisper-thin wings and a slender torso. But by using that relative clause, I just make it a bit more powerful. And the word myriad means like a huge variety. So we're trying to use different vocabulary here. And if you'll notice, my word of the day today is thesaurus. So you could use thesaurus.com to put in some words that you have thought of that you think you might be able to improve, just to see what synonyms or maybe antonyms you can use. I would advise you not to use the thesaurus constantly though, because otherwise your sentences will end up getting a bit confusing if you're using a thesaurus for every single word. Right, the next sentence we have includes a bit of figurative language. So we've got, my dragon's shimmering scales dazzle in the crescent moonlight. Shimmering scales is a type of alliteration. You will also see that I've used an apostrophe in dragons because those shimmering scales belong to the dragon. I keep saying I, these are students, so these are not my examples. I apologise if I keep saying I. My next example is titanium-like, so there's a bit of simile there. Impenetrable scales cover its body. So if something is impenetrable, it means you can't get through it. So titanium-like impenetrable scales cover its body. A terrifying anger courses through its veins. If something is coursing through something, it's travelling through it. And they have used a semicolon there to link two independent clauses. So they could have had those as two separate sentences, but they've linked them with a semicolon instead. The last example I've got, I really like because it's used a preposition at the beginning to tell me where something is. Atop its scaly head sits a pair of razor-sharp horns above a pair of piercing amber eyes. So there's just a few more things for you to think about there, like what you could include when you start your description. So your task today is to write a character description of the dragon that you saw in that first picture. If you'd like to look at some other pictures of dragons and describe them, that's absolutely fine. And you need to aim to try and include figurative language, so things like similes, metaphors, personification, and alliteration. A variety of sentences, so can you use those relative clauses? Can you use those short sentences that we have been talking about? Can you use your dashes to emphasize something? Can you use brackets to add extra information? Try and use prepositions. So prepositions tell you where things are. So above, next to, betwixt, atop. How many of those can you think of to start your sentences with? And can you try and use at least one relative clause, which is something that adds extra information beginning with who, which, or that? And a few things to remember. Once you finish, read your writing aloud. Do you notice any mistakes or places where you could make improvements? Have you included everything you were meant to include? So if you go back to the last slide, you can see all the things I have asked you to include. Are there spellings that you need to correct? Have you missed your capital letters and full stops and commas and things like that? Just quickly check over them. And then I would suggest you read it aloud to an adult. Do they picture in their mind the picture you are describing? So if you read it to them first and then you show them the picture after, see if that's what they were picturing in their head whilst you were reading it. If it's not what they were picturing, why not? How might you make your description better? So for example, you might not have described how scaly its skin is. You might not have described what colour it is. You might not have described how long its tail is or how powerful it is. So they might be able to tell you a few things that you've missed that you can make improvements to. Okay, so that is your task. So once you've done that, if you upload it to hopefully Teams, if not, it will be on Tapestry, but hopefully by the time this video goes up, I will know where to advise you to do that. Thank you for listening.